All right, it's 12:03, so I hope everybody had a chance to jump on. My name is Casey Harriet. I am the R3 coordinator for the Department of Wildlife and National Wild Turkey Federation. Essentially, I help to create programs and initiatives that get people out hunting, educating them on hunting, and etc. And today, we are going to be talking about teal and resident goose season, and I have Mr. Jason Rockwell here. He is the migratory game bird technician.
Correct.
And he is going to share a PowerPoint with us. So how this is going to go is we're going to do the PowerPoint presentation. We're going to have a game warden talk a little bit about regulations, and then we're going to open it up to a Q&A at the end. So if you think of questions as we're going through our presentation, just type them in the chat box here, and I will field all those questions for either the game warden or Jason at the end of the session. And we should have around 20 minutes or more for those questions. So we're going to go ahead and get started. I'm going to share our PowerPoint right here. Give me 1 second, and then we'll get started. And I always like to hear an audible like, yes, I can see this, because I get a little gun shy that this isn't visible. So can someone tell me they see this?
Yes, I can see it.
Perfect. Okay, thank you very much. All right, I'm going to let Jason get started.
All right, well, hello everyone. So this is me. I'm the migratory game bird technician with ODWC, and excited to talk about the September teal season that we've got kicking off tomorrow, as well as the special resident Canada goose season that gets going here pretty quick too. A little bit of information about what hunting these species might look like, and this will be just kind of like a 10,000-foot level overview, kind of September hunting for Waterfowl 101 here. So here's some things that I wanted to cover. First, just starting with just waterfowl basics. It can be kind of an intimidating first step to get into this world. And so I want to just, again, real briefly go over some things there, but definitely chime in if I miss anything, or maybe go a little too brief on anything at the end. We'll talk specifically about September teal season, a little bit about the species that are out there, their biology, what kind of habitat you can find them in, and kind of how to scout for them. We'll go into some real brief, just kind of decoy and call type stuff, and then talk about shot size, the bag limits, and just a few other notes. Then we'll kind of rinse and repeat, do the same thing for the Canada goose species, kind of the overview, where to find them again, calls, things like that, and then a few things at the end.
Yeah.
So waterfowl hunting can be a little bit intimidating. There's really probably no nice way to say it. There's bows, there's blinds, there's calls, there's all kinds of specialized equipment. There's all these weird things we call stamps to be on the license front, good to go. There's waterfowl specific dogs, and there's different breeds of dogs to think about and all of that. But the good part is you don't really have to jump in the deep end. Like a lot of things, if you're not afraid to take that initiative and get going, you can start small, see if it's for you, and kind of learn as you go, and then you can build up to a lot of those things. And most of those things, especially in the parentheses there, those are just going to expand your opportunities. They're not really barriers in any way. If you have a boat, you're just going to have that much more opportunity because you have that much more access. So that would be the first thing right off the top, is just try not to get intimidated by kind of all that is waterfowl hunting. And like I said there, the bullet point, don't be afraid to just keep it very simple and very small scale getting started. And September teal season is a kind of a good way to do that, because like we'll talk about, you don't have to go crazy on a lot of the equipment and decoys like maybe some other forms of hunting would require later on in the season, when sort of the quote unquote normal duck season starts up. So you're looking for general, again, basic waterfowling needs. 12 or 20 gauge shotgun would be most common. If you're looking to be kind of a generalist, probably recommend a 12 gauge, because that'll open up geese for you a lot better. You're going to need to choke that down. This isn't shotgun 101, but just in general terms, shotguns aren't the only way to get after ducks, but definitely the most effective for the way our seasons are set up. And I use an improved cylinder or modified choke, just so you can keep a lethal pattern on the ducks that you're going after. Nothing too tight, especially again with teal, as we'll talk about. It's a pretty small bird. So that's my recommendation there. One thing that's very key to waterfowl, and it's very important, is non-toxic shot. That might be something that we talk about a little bit later with kind of the rules and regs part of thing, but for sure that's critical, all kinds of waterfowl hunting. There's different options. Probably the most common and sort of cost effective is going to be steel shot. that's the most readily available. And so it comes in all kinds of, sizes and shape, like every other thing targeted towards hunters and anglers out there. So getting back to the, which choke to use, what shotgun to use, my recommendation is you need to definitely pattern your shotgun. And so, get some ammunition, try out one or the other of the choke, and just kind of see what you've got. You want to be aware of how you're going to shoot, just like with any other game before you get going. So that's an important thing there. That's not a bullet point. As far as calls go, a basic mallard call is going to be a really general option for you. This, again, overview of all waterfowl hunting. You can do a lot with a mallard call, even beyond targeting mallards. And then something that's a lot of times overlooked is there are species-specific calls out there. And as you progress through and want to complicate things, by all means, start adding those to your arsenal there. But a whistle is another really effective tool that a lot of people overlook. And they can be species specific whistles too, but that can be something that's just a little bit different than what everybody else is doing, and can be a really good tool to have. Decoys are going to be important. You can definitely go duck hunting without them, but they change the game for sure. But you can, again, start pretty small. A lot of times I hunt over a dozen decoys or even less. I hunt a lot of small water, beaver pond type stuff, and you don't see 1,000 ducks landing in those all at once. And so you're trying to replicate as best you can what you're seeing when you're scouting. And you can accomplish that a lot of times with a dozen or two decoys. And again, keep it kind of a cost-effective way to start. Another thing that you got to, even if we're starting small and starting simple, you're going to need to keep your feet dry. And so hip boots at a minimum, and investing in some good waders are going to be really important, as it's not going to surprise anybody. You're going to find ducks in the water. And so you're going to be near or in the water yourself quite a bit. So that's a kind of you need to have it type of equipment there. And then camouflage is absolutely critical for waterfowl. These birds, no matter what the species you're talking about, incredibly good eyesight. They can pick out the speculum colors on their own species from, way up in the air. So they will absolutely see you if you are not camoed up. And so there's not a hunter orange requirement that there is on some other types of hunting and things like that. And the very simple reason is it's just the ducks would absolutely see you. So camouflage is something you can't skimp on. And then bug spray. Bug spray is a lifesaver, especially with the September season. So we still got heavy mosquitoes and ticks and chiggers and all those fun critters out there. So don't neglect that. Even later in the season, that's kind of a must-have in my book. And then again, just hitting on the license and stamps thing. Duck hunting is pretty straightforward, and depending on if you already have a hunting license or even like a lifetime license, there's going to be different sort of layers of what you'll need to do to be legal there. But just know that there are different stamps. There's a state stamp for waterfowl, as well as a federal stamp. Waterfowl are federally regulated. And so there's just different layers of licenses. So just be aware of what the regulations are. They're not really overly complicated, but it's not as simple as you buy a hunting license and you're good to go. The next step then is just identify some public lands. There's a lot of water out in Oklahoma that's publicly available. So, start educating yourself there. Or if you can secure permission on private lands, start to identify those and then just get out there, because that's the absolute best learning tool you're going to have is to get out in the field. So teal specifically, there's a few species of teal out there. The most common that we're going to get here in Oklahoma or in the Central Flyway in general are the green-winged teal and the blue-winged teal, and there's a couple pictures there. I will point out that at this time of year, the bottom picture there, the blue-winged teal, they're not necessarily going to be plumed out just like that. They're going to be a little bit more drab than that. But either way, it hits on the point that duck identification is going to be a key thing as well. I almost included it as part of the equipment of having like an ID guide. But teal are dabbling ducks, and so what that means is they tip up to feed, or they just kind of with their bills skim the top of the water. They're not diving down below the water surface like a diver would out on more open water. And that's important to know as a hunter, because you're trying to target food sources. And so understanding a little bit of the feeding behavior is important. Especially in September, blue-winged teal are going to be the most abundant duck species that you're going to see out there. They're really, really early migrators. So they are the last to leave when they're down south, and they leave up north really, really quickly. And that's why we have the September season, is to try to give a little bit of an added opportunity, of course, but also to try to time up with when these ducks are going to be moving down. So they widely are distributed, but predominantly breed in the what we call the prairie pothole region, which is the Dakotas, sort of the eastern fringe of Montana and up into Saskatchewan. So that's where they have been for the past several weeks and beyond into the summer. But especially with the cooler weather we've got coming, even as early as next week, they're going to be making their way down. They are pretty prolific migrators. They, like I said, they're way up there in Canada, a lot of them, and some further north than that, but they're known to go as far as Venezuela or Colombia in South America. They're omnivores, but during their migration, they're going to be focused in more heavily on plant material for their diet. But as we'll talk about here in just a minute, there's some different places to find them habitat wise because they are omnivorous. So habitat and scouting, it's no fun to go hunting if you don't see any birds. So scouting is absolutely critical. And so where do you begin scouting? You need to know a little bit about your target and a little bit about what their feeding behavior and things like that would be. So where you're going to find teal are shallow wetlands with emergent vegetation or on big mud flats where there are little invertebrates and things like that, that again, they're skimming through to feed on. And when it comes to teal season, I would encourage you to think on the football field scale as opposed to just like stock ponds and things like that. Later on in November, December, January, when ducks are migrating through, little bitty bodies of water can hold just an unbelievable amount of ducks. But teal kind of prefer super shallow expanses of water. And so you want to look for areas like that you would have permission to hunt on. Sorghum and millet are really good food sources, as well as the seeds of just a ton of native plants. And that's, again, what they're going to be targeting right about this time and through the winter time. So whether that's water bodies that are adjacent to sorghum or millet fields, or if there's, even if there's flooded fields, those would definitely be places to key in on. And like I said, they're more likely found on sort of the backwaters of reservoirs or just large expanses of very, very shallow water. And when I say shallow water, I'm talking about 3 inches to maybe up to 9 to 12 inches deep. They're not really big ducks. And so whenever they do just tip up to feed, they only can reach, so far down into the water to feed. And that's why you really want to target that shallow water. So again, try to scout grassy points, mud flats, sheet water fields. If we get rains at the right time, harvested fields that get flooded out can be dynamite for where you'll find these guys. And there's no substitution for scouting. You can do a lot of scouting from the internet and things like that with all the mapping technology that we have out there. It makes it a lot easier, but you got to get behind a windshield and you got to get your eyes behind some binoculars at some point and find where the birds are going to be. So once you've got your habitat kind of zeroed in, you've secured a spot to go hunting, the next thing we need to talk about is decoys to try to draw them into your exact spot. Ideally, the best decoy placement, because you'll see online all kinds of how-tos and decoy formations and J hooks and all this complicated thing. But the best advice I could give you is just put your decoys where the ducks already want to be. And so that's, again, that goes back to the scouting part. But as far as types of decoys to use, again, talking about teal, they do make teal specific decoys. So you could get, a dozen green wing or blue wing teal decoys and roll with that, and you probably have good success. But don't feel like you need to be limited to that, especially if you're just starting out. A mallard decoy is something that's a little bit more universal. It's really available, affordable most of the time. And hen decoys will work really well. They're a little bit more drab, and they're going to look similar to what the teal would look like. Even if the scale of the decoy is bigger than what the actual bird is, that doesn't necessarily hurt you when you're trying to get birds' attention. So the hen decoys of really a lot of different species, just more of a brown overall look is going to help you out when you're targeting teal. And so again, for somebody who's just getting started, I would absolutely recommend you go with the mallard decoys, just because, again, you can be more universal and make your dollar go farther that way. And along the same lines, like I mentioned before, 1 to 2 dozen decoys is plenty. As you, again, progress through and get more into waterfowling, you're definitely going to want to add to that and diversify what kind of decoys you've got and all that kind of thing. But that's a good starting point. And then there's all kinds of new decoys out there. If you're reading about these kinds of things online or whatever, there's motion decoys of all kinds where they simulate, feeding in the water. You can rig up a simple jerk cord where you're sort of moving the decoys on a string and creating ripples along the water. That's a lot more lifelike, and all those things are really effective. But for teal, especially the spinning wing decoys, they're super effective. And so they're just kind of like little battery powered decoys that have a really light sort of attachment that'll spin. Some are continuous and some you can control, and they can be really effective to just kind of have that eye-catching ability as the ducks are flying overhead. As far as placing your decoys go, again, you can try to mimic all kinds of things you see online about, where to put them and things like that. But there's two things that you really need to keep in mind. Three, I guess. One is the landing zone that you want to create. This needs to be a pocket of water that's a little bit more open. It doesn't have to be completely devoid of any decoys, but it needs to be generally open where ducks will feel comfortable landing. So naturally, you want to put that, pretty much in front of where you're going to be shooting. So whether you have a blind or whether you're just hiding along some vegetation on a bank or wherever you're going to set up, you want to make sure that that landing zone is out in front of you. The next thing you need to keep in mind is the wind direction. Generally, ducks of any species are going to want to land into the wind. And so that is sort of effective, especially as the colder months come on. The good thing about duck hunting is you get to hunt with the wind at your back, unlike a lot of other species. With that said, you got to also be mindful of that big glowing ball that comes up every morning. Don't set up perfectly and have your landing zone created and then realize that you're facing, southeast, and as soon as ducks start coming in, you're going to be blind. So that's kind of the third one there, is the wind direction's key. Try to put that at your back, or at the very least a crosswind, and then know that ducks generally, like I said, are going to land into that. And then as far as the call sounds to make, again, if you get a teal call specifically, look at the back of the call. It'll have instructions on exactly what to do. If you get a mallard call or another type of call to be a little bit more general, mallards and teal don't sound terribly different. The pitch is a lot different given the size, and sort of how they vocalize is different. But a lot of the instructions you would see on a mallard call are going to be similar. I would just say try to up the pitch a little bit and just generally back off a lot of the calling. Teal generally will make a sort of a stereotypical quack sound, but they also have just sort of nasally sounds like a meep if you draw it out. And then the whistle, if you go with the whistle, especially just a real quick peep sound as you're blowing through the whistle. That's going to mimic pretty well teal calling, but teal aren't necessarily going to be super reliant. You don't have to be an expert caller, and probably less is more when it comes to teal, unlike maybe some other species. So again, depending on kind of the direction you want to go, you can definitely look at a mallard call and just know you kind of got to modify things a little bit, or just get a teal specific call, because it wouldn't be a bad thing to have even down the road if you did diversify and got into more calls. So shot size, bag limits, etc. So early teal season, the dates are important there. 9th through the 24th this year. We got to, again, make sure we're dealing with non-toxic shot, steel, tungsten, bismuth, etc. Just making sure that we don't have lead shot, essentially, is the easy way to remember that. What shot size you use is really up to you. You can go anywhere from really 4 or 5 through a 7. And with teal, you can definitely get away with the 20 gauge, a pretty small duck. But just, again, make sure to pattern your gun and skim it down to the bottom a little bit. These are fast flying ducks. They're going to be hard to hit. They'll make a good shooter look pretty bad on a good day. So you want to, make sure you're patterning your gun, but 2, you want to try to set up for pretty short shots if you can. I mean, everything needs to be within 40 yards. You want to really think of duck hunting as bringing ducks to your spread of decoys and then shooting at them that way. It's not a matter of seeing ducks flying in the air and taking sort of a crack shot at those. So try to set your shotgun up as far as where you place your decoys, as well as how you're patterning your gun for ideally like a 20 to 30 yard shot. The limit on teal, pretty liberal. You can get 6 teal a day. And I talked earlier about the different type of teal. Don't go out, duck hunting not being able to identify ducks, because you get yourself in a lot of trouble. But the good thing about teal hunting is it's an aggregate bag. So if there are green-winged teal already in your area, you're perfectly fine to go after those, even though, again, blue-winged teal are going to be more likely. But yeah, very fast flying birds. They'll be flying a lot of times in groups of, 4 to 15 to 20, and sometimes groups larger than that. But when it comes to duck hunting, like a lot of other things, you have to identify your target. And while you have a big flock of ducks coming in, there's sort of a general tendency to just sort of shoot at the cloud of ducks, and making sure you're really identifying your target is important. You'll be a better shooter that way, have a lot less crippled ducks and things like that. Also important is, while it is especially early in September, it's a teal season. There's going to be teal migrating through, but that doesn't mean there aren't mallards around. There aren't wood ducks around. Random resident birds, just random early migrators. If we get a nice, big push on a cold front, that's going to bring new birds in. And so you definitely need to not just go out thinking that the teal will be the only ducks around. And that just is just solid hunting advice in general, is IDing your target. The best way to do that is just, get on your phone like you probably already are, get online. There's all kinds of cool tools. I use one through the Cornell Bird Lab. You can identify birds on those things on an app on your phone by the song that they make even. They're pretty awesome. Tons of cool color pictures showing all the different plumages throughout the year. Those are really helpful. And then the picture there, the ducks at a distance, that's a little like paperback kind of a book that I carry. It's always just something I put in my bag too. It's a really useful tool. There's another one out there. It's called the Lee Master method. And that's really handy identification tool as well. Yeah, and then like I said, just try to make sure that you're decoying in birds and shooting them at a close range, and you're doing that as much to be effective as a hunter as you are being able to very firmly identify what ducks you are. As a lot of them will, a lot of them have a lot of similar characteristics, and if you're trying to make a 45, 50-yard shot in low light condition, you're probably bound to be making a mistake. So one other note here I would point out is with duck hunting, and with any waterfowl hunting, unlike some other forms of hunting, is a lot of your setup time is going to happen in the dark for sure. 30 minutes before sunrise, you can get after them. So you got to be set up really early. What that'll also lead to, though, and the reason why it's relevant here is, again, the identification is going to be critically important, because you're going to have some low light scenarios where early birds could be moving into your spread, but only pull that trigger if you know for sure, what you're shooting at. All right, so switching gears over to Canada geese. Canada geese is a concurrent season that'll be kicking off. It has a little bit different end date that you want to be aware of, but generally they run side by side. It's a little bit different approach, but the sort of the reason behind it is very similar. So unlike teal, which we open up in September because they're very early migrators, the Canada goose, sort of the special season that we have, is really targeting resident geese, or geese that aren't necessarily migrating through. So these are the geese you see at the golf course, the subdivision, the lake, that don't necessarily migrate. Some of them do migrate, but they're generally around, and you're seeing them year round. And so we have this season to just sort of enhance an opportunity, as well as kind of a population control measure, which I'll talk about. But geese are grazers, so they are going to be feeding on grasses and grains. And as far as targeting them, a lot of times duck hunting is going to be more of a, over water. With geese, it can be over water, but just as much there's going to be field hunts. The cool thing about the Canada goose is it's one of the great conservation success stories of all time. They were thought to be extinct in the 1950s, and if you've been around Oklahoma much at all, that's probably hard to believe because they're everywhere. And so they are super abundant, almost to a problem in some places, hence again the season. And we see them year round because they have such good habitat now that they don't even need, all of them don't feel the need to leave. So the special resident season was created to kind of counteract a little bit of that population. But just as much of that, it's just to provide another opportunity, especially early in the season, if you've got geese in your area, to go ahead and try to target those. And it's a great opportunity to get kids out when the weather, it's hot right now, but if it gets a little bit more mild, it's a good opportunity, because a lot of waterfowling will happen in pretty awful weather, which can make it a little bit harder for the kiddos to get involved. So geese are going to use, again, they're going to use large bodies of water and reservoirs. They'll use that for their feeding areas. A lot of times those same reservoirs are going to have walk up or swim up areas that are, manicured lawns or state parks or whatever that they've gotten really accustomed to, and they will just graze the heck out of those sort of Bermuda lawn looking setups as much as anything. So they will also be found on, you know, medium to large stock ponds, especially ones that are adjacent or pretty close to crop fields, because they're going to hammer those crop fields, you know, to feed on, and then they got to get back to water through a couple times throughout the day. And so again, that kind of goes back to the how you're going to choose to hunt them and what access you have to different spots where you're seeing geese. Are you going to set up for more of a water-based hunt or a land-based hunt? But they'll, like I said, graze on those cut fields. And so as you're scouting, and again, where you may have permission, being aware of agriculturally what's going on, and seeing these birds. The good thing about scouting geese is pretty easy. They're real easy to see, and they travel in big groups. But they can be very site specific. So if you are in a field that's 400 yards away where there's 400 geese, you probably won't shoot any geese. They are not going to move out of their way regardless of how fancy your decoys are. So you really have to zero in. And in September, you're talking about hunting geese that live here pretty much all the time. So they know exactly where they want to go and where they want to be. And that can make them incredibly difficult to decoy. Again, going back to your best decoy spread or placement is going to be where they already want to be, and just getting in there, you know, in between times that they're there or in the dark before they're there, kind of thing. And so whether if you're hunting over water, you know, and sort of targeting them during that part of the day versus, you know, feeding in the fields, you're going to set up entirely differently. You're going to have different gear. A lot of times folks will use like layout blinds where you're essentially laying out in the field and you've brushed that blind in and covered it up. So you're just laying down and hunting it that way, versus, you know, what you might think of as traditional like waterfowl blind. The only thing I mean, there's a lot of different strategy, and a lot of it comes down to where, you know, where have you scouted, where are you seeing them? That's where you want to hunt, is where they're going to be, and what do you have permission to hunt on too. But the important thing here, especially with geese, but really all waterfowl, is you don't want to hunt the roost, which is where they're basically spending the night. If you blow them out of that, even though there may be, you know, hundreds of geese there one day, it might be a one-time thing. And so some people will do that, choosing to just get one good hunt out of it, but they will quickly find somewhere else to be if you go into their bedroom, so to speak. So wherever they're sleeping, you generally want to leave them there, figure out where they're going next, and that would be the best place to go hunting for them. So decoys and calls, a little bit different with geese hunting. You really do need to kind of go big or go home a lot of the time. So the most decoys you can afford or get into is probably the best way to go. The good news is you can kind of skimp a little bit on the cost and use silhouettes, which are basically 2D, almost look like an archery target that you can stake in. So those are great for saving a lot of space, getting out to your hunting spot. They're a lot cheaper as well. So you can mix and match with full body. There's shells, which are sort of hollowed out versions of decoys that lay on the ground for a field hunt. There's wind socks. I've heard stories of people that have used, you know, tires cut in half and painted black and white. I mean, there's a lot of ways you can go, but you just need a wow factor. Geese travel in generally pretty big flocks, and so they are going to feel the most comfortable a lot of times where they're already A, wanting to be, and B, they've got that reassurance that there's already a big group of geese down there. It must be safe. And then what I talked about earlier, be mindful of, again, the sun, the wind direction, and making sure you have a landing zone. Geese are really, really large birds, and so you're going to want to make sure you have knockdown power that we'll talk about here in just a second, but a lot of that is range as well. So being mindful of that landing zone. Goose calling, there's really not a substitute. You definitely can't get away with a mallard call for trying to call in a goose, and they can be a pretty steep learning curve, but there are some calls that are designed to be a little bit more beginner friendly, so you can search those out, and then there's all kinds of YouTube videos and everything else that can get you sort of to the passable level of calling. And if you've ever got buddies to go out with you, you know, buy them a goose call to get them enticed to go hunting with you, because the more callers you have in one area, the more you're going to mimic sort of that realistic nature. If you have, you know, 100 decoys out there and one goose call, something just doesn't seem right a lot of times to the geese. So the more callers you have, the better. But no, it's going to take some practice. And like I said, there's a lot of online tools that can get you pretty confident pretty quick. So shot size and things like that, you're going to use lot larger BBs the size that you would for teal. So BB size, again, non-toxic shot, whatever option you go with there. But it's got to be big. It's got to have a lot of punch. So 12 gauge is pretty much the most mainstream option for sure. And you're going to look for a 3 or even 3.5 inch shell because you need to reach out and really have a lot of knockdown power because they're very large, powerful birds. Bag limit is 8. So every day, again, you can get 8. There are, probably should have mentioned, there's several subspecies of Canada geese. But again, like the teal, you're covered if it's a Canada goose, regardless of what subspecies you may encounter. They're really easy to identify, and you can get 8 of them. So again, just to close with that, the scouting is absolutely critical. It's critical for any kind of hunting you do. It's critical for waterfowl hunting. But when you're targeting a species that lives here year round and knows where they want to be, there's just not going to be a lot that's going to get them out of their habit and their pattern. And so you've got to go find where they already want to be. So final thoughts for me, just to kind of wrap up that portion, is just, again, going back to the intimidation factor, and it can feel overwhelming, is I just recommend that you don't be intimidated. I started out duck hunting by begging my mom to let me have a shotgun and then a duck stamp, and I went out and I shot a mallard on an irrigation canal, and I was hooked ever since. But I had no call, I had no decoys, I had no dog. You got to start somewhere, and nobody starts off as an expert. So just getting out there and immersing yourself with it is the best way to learn. And it can be fun at that early stage, and it can keep being fun as you keep targeting them. So use the resources that are out there. It's a great thing about the internet, man. You can become an expert on a lot of things. And there's a lot of great resources out there, whether you want to target specific species or types of hunting. So definitely use those things that are out there, especially when you're in a tree stand or in a blind and you're waiting for something. If you got cell service, I'm not above trying to be a better hunter by looking at my phone. So, and then don't think that this is just about shooting stuff. Teal are absolutely one of the best tasting things out there, and in the duck world, especially, they're very, very tasty. So if you're lucky enough to harvest any this year, take advantage of them to the fullest for sure. But ultimately, it boils down to, if you can be spending time outside with people that you care about, those are the trophies. A lot of duck hunters and waterfowlers get into, leg bands and all that kind of thing. And with other kinds of hunting, there's different kinds of trophies. But ultimately, it always boils down to just getting out there with important people. And those are absolutely the best trophies. So
making memories. Okay, I did want to add, I'm going to stop sharing here. Let's see. Am I done sharing? Oh, stop sharing. I did want to add, during his final thoughts, I think if you're interested in getting into duck hunting in general, a great option for you is joining an NGO like DU, Ducks Unlimited, or Delta Waterfowl. A lot of times those conservation organizations will have learn to hunt classes, or you can meet and network with people that would be glad to take you out or have connections to do so. So getting plugged in any sort of non-government organization, conservation organization like that would be a really good start. And there's tons, probably more local than you think. So I do want to mention that. So I want to quickly shift gears to regulations with Jacob Harriet over here, because he has somewhere to be at around 12:45, 12:50. So I'll let you take it away, Jacob.
Okay, can you hear me all right?
Yes.
Okay. Sorry, guys, I have a training at 12:45 I have to be in, but I'm going to go through this pretty quick, just talk about the regulation portion. Jason, you did a really good job covering most of it, so made my job pretty easy. So to hunt migratory birds, you have to have your hunting license, you have to have your federal stamp and your state stamp, and then you have to have your HIT permit. So basic requirements, that's for all migratory birds just about. We get into possession limit. So the possession on teal is 6. The possession on resident goose is 8. You can have, for each day you hunt, you can have your possession limit up to 3. So if you hunt one day, you can have 6 geese, or sorry, 6 teal. If you hunt 2 days, you can have 12 teal. If you hunt 3, you can have 18. Same with goose, but just add 8 of them. But after 3 days, you're not allowed to have more than that in your possession at any one time. Shooting hours is 1/2 hour before sunrise to official sunset. That's just to protect them on the roost. Legal means to take, Jason did really well. Your shotguns are the main ones. There's some other stuff you can archery hunt them. shotgun is primarily the thing, especially if you're getting into it. You do need non-toxic shots, so steel shot, or there's some fancier, heavier metals that are non-toxic as well. All those boxes will be labeled as non-toxic. Your gun needs to have a plug in it, so that means that your shotgun cannot hold more than 3 shells at a time. In the field, as a game warden, I come out and I check that, so I make sure we can't put more than 3 shells in it at any one time. Other than that, so field tagging, you don't have to tag your birds, but if you are going to give those birds to somebody else, you need to give them a receipt saying that so I would be like me, Jacob Harriet, my license number, what the animals are, and then who that is going to. So you have to document where those birds are going, and they have to have a basically documentation that they acquired this legally. Field dressing, just make sure you're not leaving birds and wasting them. Every year we get complaints of people shooting birds and then they just go dump them on the road somewhere or something like that. As hunters, we should value the meat quality of these birds. So when you shoot something, take care of it, eat it. Don't go throw it out. All that does is give you all the hunters a bad rap. We don't want that. Other than that, if you shoot a banded bird, make sure you call that number in and get the information on it. You get some really cool data from that. And I think that's about it on the regs. I would caution you that your bird seasons are not the same. So teal goes from the 9th to the 24th of September. Resident goose goes from the 9th to the 18th. So make sure on that. Both these seasons coincide with dove season. Dove you can hunt with toxic shot, with lead shot. You cannot hunt these waterfowl with that. So if you're hunting both, you can't have any of that lead shot in your possession. So if you're hunting both at the same time, or you hunted one and now you're going to hunt the other, make sure you don't have that lead shot with you. If you're in the field and a game warden checks you, just be not. I mean, we're hunting guys too. I mean, we like talking to hunters, so we're going to come out, check you. Make sure your gun's pointed in a safe direction. Every year I get flagged by guns. Just make sure it's in a safe direction. Unload it. We'll check your licenses. We'll check the plug in your gun. We'll check your birds. And other than that, you guys just get out there and have a fun, safe, early President Goose and Teal season.
Jacob, where can they find these regulations at?
So our regulations are online. You can get it through the Go Outdoor Oklahoma app. You can get it on our website, the Oklahoma Department of Wildlife, or you can get them. We pass out reg books to a lot of like Walmarts, Atwoods, Bass Pros, Cabela's. So there's free copies of those regs books in all those stores.
Awesome. Well, thank you for making that work on your training day.
Yeah, no problem. I'll stay on here a few minutes away. I'm in the back seat. So.
Okay, so we're gonna open it up to question and answer now. I don't have anything in the chat box right now, so either you did a fantastic job or no one's I would mean to say that, but no one is asking any questions yet. So if you want to just unmute yourselves if you do have a question for either of these guys, please just go ahead and do so. It's a small enough group where we can kind of make this personable. So if you guys have any questions for them, let me know.
Hey guys, I got a question. I've had some conflicting stories and kind of tough to track down the regulations around the river hunting and which rivers you actually can hunt up to the high water mark or, on the shoreline. Or I know some other rivers like the Canadian, once you step foot or drop an anchor in the water, it's considered private property. What are the rivers that allow you to hunt from the shoreline?
So I'm in central Oklahoma, and around here, none of them are huntable. None of my rivers are navigable. There might be some up like Arkansas, some of the bigger rivers that you can, but I'm not familiar with that area. So the way it works here is the water is owned by the state, but the landowners own the soil. So that is under the river, that's on the side of the banks. So if you touch any sort of soil, you're trespassing. If you're shooting birds, all my rivers, you're going to be on dirt. There's just not enough water in it to stay on the float. So you can't hunt without landowner permission on the river. That's in my area. It's North Canadian, Deep Fork, Cimarron, all those areas. You have to have private landowner permission.
Hopefully that
Thanks.
clarified for you.
Yeah, I'm just trying to figure out which ones you don't need the permission to. I think it's maybe the verdigris or Arkansas, but again, it's, I talked to a game warden last week and he wasn't even sure which ones you could and couldn't. Is there a list somewhere where you can look that up or what?
I would call one of the game wardens in that area. I'm with a couple guys here going to this training, and he said that Arkansas is the only navigable river in Oklahoma. But if you contact one of the wardens that works that area, he'll be able to tell you. I'm so far away from there that I just don't enforce those regs, so I'm not 100% sure.
Gotcha.
Right, does anybody else have any questions?
I got one more.
Yeah, go ahead, Eric.
As far as motion decoys go, I know like the flock of flickers and mojos work well. What are your guys' thoughts on using like the dove mojo decoys for teal? And if that would work.
That's unmuted.
I think you could definitely get away with that. It's really that spinning wing, that white that's gonna flash, that's what's getting their attention. You might just have to kind of play it by ear though. I mean, if you're seeing birds work into a certain point and then they're all flaring off, that'd be the first thing I would probably cut out. But I mean, you're probably gonna have a mallard a lot of the times if you're using a spinning wing decoy, and it may be even in a spread with a bunch of other teal decoys, but it's really that motion and that white flash that's going to get their attention. So I would say if you've got it, I mean, it's another tool to use. Just be mobile about it and be willing to take it down if you notice it's not working. But that goes for decoy spreads in general. Is you got to be adaptable. Whatever you have set up may have worked one day and they're just not responding to it the next. So keep being flexible and using something that honestly just other people aren't using can sometimes be as effective as anything.
I've watched guys put them up and tear them down about 100 times in one hunt. So some people swear by them, some people hate them.
Gotcha. Thanks.
That's another thing I'd like to point out. If you guys do screw up or have an accident out there, wood ducks look a lot like teal, and you really have to be careful on your bird ID. If something happens, you do screw up, call your local warden and just let them know. If you call me, there's a chance you won't get caught, but there's also a chance that the game warden's sitting there watching you and you're going to come out and lie to them, and it's not going to be very good. So if something happens, it's a small mistake. It's an easy fix, but if you lie about it or try to hide it, you can get in a bind.
Okay. Any other questions? I'm going to go over a few things before we hop off here. So I just want to make sure everybody gets all their questions and concerns.
I'm going to have to get off here, guys. I appreciate it. Enjoy the season, but I'm going to have to go.
All right. Thank you, Jacob.
Yep. Thanks, guys. Good luck.
So I'm reading the chat right here. It says, so you can hunt teal and local Canadian geese on a WRPs during season. I know it's prohibited the 15th through the 31st.
Yeah, I mean, generally there's going to be different closures in different places for controlled hunts and all kinds of things like that. So that's always depending on exactly where you're looking at. But generally speaking, the question there is correct. They would be open.
In WRP is Wetland Reserve Program, or
most likely in this context, yeah. Could also be a waterfowl refuge portion, which is how we identify some of our WMA, the lines getting drawn. And so some of those, again, depending on where you're looking, some of those refuges are going to be just completely that. They're going to be a refuge and not open to harvest at all. Others, it'll be a temporary thing, depending on if, again, there's other controlled hunts in the area, or if we've got our youth hunts going on, even things like that. So the best advice really is just depending on exactly which one you're thinking of, read the specific rules for that one, or call up the biologist for that area and make sure ahead of time as possible to do that. But yeah, it could be either one. I assume it's the refuge was part of the question.
When in doubt, always call the biologist or shoot them an email. And if you don't get a call there or a response back, then shoot the game warden an email or a text or a call. And between those two in the area, they can get you settled up on that.
And a lot of times that those kinds of questions can be answered as they're scouting too, because they'll be pretty obvious if they're closed temporarily or permanently or whatever. If you're getting out looking for birds and you see those signs, you'll know to, to keep looking.
Okay, that's a good question. I do want to mention, and keep the questions coming if you have them, but I do want to mention right now that we're going to have some more classes coming up soon, and I haven't lined out the speakers to lock it in yet, but just keep a look for the last weekend before October 1st. We're going to have a deer archery class if you're interested in that. The first week of October, we're going, Jacob, Harriet, and me, he's my husband if you haven't figured that out yet. We're going to go do a deer processing Q&A where we break down how we process our deer just at home. We've done a YouTube live skinning and quartering demonstration last year, and so this would kind of be like in addition or a part 2 to that. So make sure you check out that. It's still on our Outdoor Oklahoma YouTube channel if you want to get the first part and then watch the Q&A and come with questions. And then we're going to have a muzzleloading deer class on October 25th, most likely. Haven't nailed that down with the speaker yet, so it might shift. But once again, just check our outdoor calendar the same way you signed up for these classes, and that'll be available too. And then for sure, we are doing a November 8th waterfowl dedicated just a waterfowl class. And that'll be on Wednesday, November 8th at 12 p.m. as well. Okay, looks like we have another question. It says, I have ducks, geese, turkey, and chicken in my backyard that free range. I have had Canadian geese, black-bellied, whistling ducks, wood ducks, and now I land in the yard just from that. Real birds work well.
Read the smaller print there on the regulations, because there's some rules about live decoys. So yeah, they absolutely will get real birds, will get birds' attention, but let's stick to the hard plastics when we're out there in the field.
I would imagine they would work for them.
I can confirm that looks a lot like my backyard, and yeah, we have Canada geese fly over every morning. So yeah, I agree.
If you guys are also interested in checking out some of our, my wife will let you know the backyard. I've heard that too.
I sorry to say that also sounds pretty familiar.
Yeah. What I was saying was, if you want to look at some more details of this waterfowl migratory bird page on our website, we go to wildlifedepartment.com. You go to the tab that says hunting, go to hunting resources, and go down. You can select waterfowl specifically, and it'll break it down even further. I will have this class recorded, and I usually get this up on our YouTube channel within the day. The upload process on these hour-long videos is pretty lengthy, and so it'll take me at least 24 hours or so to edit the before and after and everything and get it posted on there. But it'll be under a playlist called Learn to Hunt Classes, so you can go back at any time and watch this, and I will send the recording also out to the people that were signed up. So if you want to share it with anybody that wanted to come on but couldn't make it, please share it, and we will always have this on our YouTube channel to look back on. Okay, well, I think we might have wrapped it up with 8 minutes to spare. If you guys have any questions or follow-up questions, please don't hesitate to shoot me an email. And then if I can't answer it, I will probably forward it to Jason since he's the expert here. So I sure appreciate you guys joining us today. I hope to see you guys again for some of our later classes. And if there's any classes that you guys think would be interested, or that you would be interested in that we have not covered, please shoot me a suggestion. I would love to cover things that we haven't yet done. So for example, one person said they would like a foraging class. And so we're going to do a foraging class in the spring when the morels come out and the sand plums, etc. So we will, until next time, we will see you guys hopefully the last week of September before deer archery season. Thank you guys for attending, and thank you, Jason, for giving us a great presentation.
No problem. Good luck out there, everyone.